So let's have a look at exercise 4i. It says, in these questions, unless told to calculate the equations of the perpendicular bisectors, you can construct the lines with a pair of compasses by eye or by using software. Okay, so they've actually chosen points that we can, by eye, using the graph paper, we can actually find out where the midpoint is. And we can do that in this one at least. Let's have a look at those. Okay, so we're going to start with these points here. We're going to call that A, that B, and that C, and we're going to plot them here. So what I've put over here, this is from the Oxford IB Applications and Interpretation SL book. Okay, that's actually the incremental algorithm right here. That's here, but we're not going to use it, okay, because this one's not that difficult. Okay, so I've plotted A, that's A, B, and C, and so we're not going to use the algorithm, we're just going to do it by eye, and I think with 3 points, and especially these 3 points, you see they're on the same, they're horizontal ones, those ones, and it kind of works out pretty well, and C's in the middle of those. So by eye we can do this. Now the first step would be actually just to find the midpoint, but we can see what the midpoint is between here and here. The midpoint is there, that's the midpoint. And similarly over here, that would be the midpoint there, and here the midpoint is there. So we don't need to use the midpoint formula to find the midpoint form to find the midpoint, right? That's the one of x1 plus x2 divided by 2 and y1 plus y2 divided by 2 to find the midpoint of these points, because we can see it by eye. So we're going to put those in first. Okay, so I've added the midpoints. So if we know the midpoints, now we can draw in the perpendicular bisector. So the one between A and B will be there, the one between C and B will be here, and the one between A and C will be here. Okay, so let me add those. Okay, so I've added the perpendicular bisectors. This one here, that line there is between C and B. This line here is between A and C, and this vertical line here is between A and B. Remember, rather than use the incremental algorithm, we're just going to have a look at these three, and we're going to shade regions that are obvious. For example, this area here, that, let's say that triangle there, it's closer to C than it is to B, so we're going to shade that. And then this area here is closer to C than it is to A, because that's the line that separates C and A. So we're going to also carry this one here. We're going to colour that one there the same colour, because this is going to be the site C region. And between this triangle here, this area here is closer to A than it is to C. So we're going to colour it, we'll put that one as green. And this area here is closer to A than it is to B, so that's also going to be green. Now this area here is closer to B than it is to A, that triangle there, if you will. So we're going to colour that, okay, because this area here is closer to B than it is to A, so it's part of the B region. And this area here is closer to B than it is to C, because that line separates B and C, so that's part of B as well. Here we go. And that looks quite similar to this one over here. Good. So that's 1A. Let's have a look at 1B. Okay, we're going to use 3 different points here. We'll call that A and B and C. All right, the first step again is to plot these points. Okay, and I've just done that. We've got A and B and C. Okay, the next step is to find the midpoints between C and B, B and A and C. All right, and we can do that by, well, just take the average. Remember, the midpoint is the average, so that's 3 plus 1 is 4 divided by 2. So the x value there is 2, and of course it's on y equals 1, so that's the midpoint there. Similarly here, look at the y values, and we've got 5 and 1, so that's 6 divided by 2, so y becomes 3, and it's on the same x equals 3 line. Over here, we can see the difference in the x values is 1 and 3, so it's going to be at 2 because 1 plus 3 is 4 divided by 2 will be 2, so it'll be on that line, that vertical line there. And the y values is 1 and 5, so that's 6, so that's going to be on 3, so that'll be the midpoint of that side there. Let's write those in. Okay, so I've added the midpoints there. Now what we need to do is put the perpendicular bisectors in, so this will be a line between A and C will be this line here. There'll be a horizontal line between C and B and a vertical line between A and B. So we'll add those. Okay, I've added the perpendicular bisectors and you can see they all intersect at this point here, and that's what we would expect. Okay, our next step is to do what we did before. We're going to look at the regions now around the sites, and we can see that this area here is closer to C than it is to B, so we're going to colour that. And this area here is closer to C than it is to A, so that's going to be a C. And then we're going to look at here, this area here, okay, that area is closer to A than it is to C, so I'm going to fill that in. And this area here is closer to A than it is to B, so that's going to be an A. And then this area here is closer to B than it is to C. And this area here is closer to B than it is to A. Okay, and that looks pretty close to this one over here. They've gone to the other side of the y-axis. It's unbounded, but they've actually put it, the domain there is -2 to 6, going up to 6. So that's, I've stopped it at 0. But it's the same kind of thing. We could have just filled in this part here. 2, a neighbourhood has 3 bookstores located at A, B and C at these coordinate points here. A, construct a Voronoi diagram for the 3 bookstores, A, B and C, either by hand or using the software package. Well, we're going to plot these 3 points on here. There we go. So we've got A here at 1, 1, B's at 5, 1, and C is at 5, 5. Okay, next step, as before, we want to find the midpoint between A and B, the midpoint between B and C, and the midpoint between A and C. Okay, so the midpoint here, if that's 5 and that's 1, that's 6, so that should be at 3 on this one. So very similar to the previous one. So that's the midpoint there. For BC, this is 1 and that is 5, so that's 5 and 1 is 6 divided by 2 is 3, so that's going to be there. Here, the x value, again, we see that 5 and 1 is 3, so it's going to be on that line there. And we've got 5 and 1, so it's also on 3. So at 3, 3 is going to be the midpoint between A and C. Let me write those in. There we go, so we put the midpoints in. This one's between A and C. This one here is between B and C, and this one here is between A and B. Now the next step is to draw the perpendicular bisectors. There we go. So I've added the perpendicular bisector here between A and C, this one here between C and B, and the vertical one here between A and B. And we're going to go through the same process. Let's look at between C and B. We can see this region here is closer to C than it is to B, so we'll colour that in. Okay, so all of that area there, that region there I should say, is closer to C, the site C, than B. And this area here is closer to C than it is to A, so that's also purple. Okay, and here, this area here is closer to A than it is to C. And this area here is closer to A than it is to B. This area here is closer to B than it is to A, and this area here is closer to B than it is to C. Okay, so that's our Voronoi diagram for this situation. And then B, determine the closest bookstore to Carrie, whose house is located at 1-4. So 1-4 is here. Well, that's in the region A, and also the site here, site A. So let's put Carrie's house here. Okay, so I'm showing Carrie's house here. So that is in region A, and it's closest to site A. And that would be bookstore A, which is site A, and this region here, the yellow region. Next part here, before C, it says a fourth bookstore was built recently at point D35. Construct the Voronoi diagram for the 4 bookstores A, B, C, D, either by hand or using software package. So we go back to our original method, but we're going to add one more bookstore here, which means it's going to get a little bit more complicated. So let's plot the points A, B, C, and D. There we go. I've added the points here, so I've got this new one here. Okay, and then we need to add the midpoints and also the perpendicular bisectors. There we go. I've added those, and it looks pretty complicated. Next step is to colour in the regions, keeping in mind we'll do the same method as before. For example, this C here, this region here is C, because it's closer to C than it is to D, but it stretches this part too, because this C here is closer to C than it is to B, and that's the line dividing between C and B. So you really need to keep an eye on, when you look at 2 points and you want to know where to shade, and sometimes up to 3 points at one time, you need to keep an eye on the dividing one, the bisector, so you can divide everything up well. Okay, and there we go, I filled everything in. It's not easy to do, but if we followed the same method, it can be done. There, and that matches pretty well with here. I obviously didn't draw this too accurately. They should have all crossed here, as you can see there, at that point. My bisectors aren't that accurate. And also here, they kind of didn't cut across there, right? You can see the one there. That one is also a bit shifted. That should be right on that point there. But pretty good. Let's have a look at D. Determine whether there is another bookstore that is now closest to Carrie's house. If so, determine which one. And we can do that by plotting Carrie's house, and Carrie's house is at 1-5, I think it was. Okay, actually it was at 1-4, so that's there. That's Carrie's house. We should write that in. There we go, and that's Carrie's house there. That's at 1-4, and it says, is there another bookstore that is now closest to Carrie's house? And the answer is yes, it's D, because this is in region D, and that is site D, and that is bookstore D. Okay, we've written that down there, bookstore D.